The hand that rocks the cradle.
She's all alone now. But don't worry, not for long.
Unlawful Entry.
So I'll only be gone an hour. I know how you hate to be alone. Okay, are you good? Are you comfortable?
Single White Female. What do these three films have in common? Each is an example of Hollywood's current love affair with hate, and on this special edition of Siskel and Ebert, we're going to be giving you at least 5 reasons why we think that current Hollywood films are much more comfortable with characters who hate each other than with characters who love each other. There's been a tremendous shift in the way Hollywood is making its stories these days. I'm Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune.
And I'm Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times. In Hollywood's golden age, love stories were a mainstay, and lots of romances ended with a couple living happily ever after. That was a cliche in the old movies, but today, it isn't like that anymore. For every happy love story, there are a dozen stories warning the audience that they can't trust their lovers, that a partner who seems ideal may turn out to be a monster in disguise. One of the obvious wellsprings for this new fear of love is the AIDS epidemic, which is illustrated dramatically in the 1990 film Longtime Companion, when a group of gay men talk uneasily about a new epidemic they've heard about.
The cause of the outbreak is unknown, and there is yet
no evidence of contagion. But the doctors who have made the diagnosis, mostly in the New York City and the San Francisco Bay Area, are alerting other physicians who treat large numbers of homosexual men to the problem in an effort to help identify more cases.
Fear of AIDS may be the source for a lot of Hollywood's new fear of love, but the movies seldom mention AIDS itself. Instead, they use other deadly illnesses as metaphors, substituting them. And the characters are usually heterosexual. Take the 1991 film Dying Young, for example. Julia Roberts is a nurse who falls in love with Campbell Scott, a victim of cancer. But doesn't this look like it might be a scene from an AIDS film?
Victor, what can I do? What can I do?
Nothing.
What do you want me to
Nothing.
do? What do you want me to do?
Nothing. There is nothing.
Francis Ford Coppola's film Bram Stoker's Dracula was about vampires, but the disease of vampirism, transmitted by blood in the throes of lust, was obviously a metaphor for AIDS. Sometimes the connection between sex and death is made even more bluntly. In 1989's Sea of Love, Al Pacino falls in love with Ellen Barkin, who may or may not be a serial killer stalking her victims through the Lonely Hearts ads.
Where's your bathroom? Where's my bag?
There was a similar danger in Madonna's recent movie, Body of Evidence. Lawyer Willem Dafoe was seduced by his sexy client, but does she really use sex as a deadly weapon?
Did you need to hear about every man I ever had sex with?
No, just the ones with bad hearts who put you in their wills.
Well, the message there is easy to read. While the old movies celebrated taking a chance on love, the new ones warn that love could be fatal. And sometimes there's a reckless undercurrent to the danger of love. Pacino in Sea of Love, Dafoe in Body of Evidence, and the victims in Dracula are all turned on by the danger represented by their possibly lethal sex partners. So this is a real death hope in a way that the movies seem to be feeding the audience.
Well, I want to get back to the issue of age and how these trends and how a trend show like this comes about. Because, I know you like the phrase where I always describe our job as being on the national dream beat, that when movies hit and resonate, as many of these films are that we're going to be talking about, that the writers, the producers are all picking up on stuff in the vapors and all this. And if you think about it, the AIDS epidemic hit the arts community very early on, and the people were aware of it earlier, feeling the effects of it earlier, and have written this story large now, as you talk about it. There are other reasons. We're going to get to those during the rest of the show, but clearly this was one of the triggers in what's going on.
It certainly is. And, of course, if you turn on television and look at all the actuality shows and all the talk shows, they always have the bad news about love. They always have news about marriages that go wrong, people that kill each other, people who have fights. We'll talk about that later in this program. Coming up next, another explanation of why Hollywood can't love. It's spelled D-I-V-O-R-C-E.
You will never get that house.
We'll see.
My wife is in the country with her parents visiting for the weekend.
And you're here with a strange girl, being a naughty boy?
I don't think having dinner with anybody is a crime.
Not yet.
That's a pivotal scene, of course, from Fatal Attraction, and every so often in the movie business there's a surprise smash hit that the audiences respond to with such intensity that all the studio chiefs and the writers and producers start thinking, oh, that's what they want. And then they give it to us again and again. Fatal Attraction from 1987 was such a film, and it continues to trigger many imitators, all inspired by, I think, the cascading divorce rate in this country. Here's an essential scene in the film.
I just want to be a part of your life.
Oh, this is the way you do it, huh? Showing up at my appointments?
What am I supposed to do? You won't answer my calls. You changed your number. I mean, I'm not going to be ignored, Dan.
And then came The Onslaught. One of the best titles, but not a very good movie, was Sleeping with the Enemy, where our once national heroine, Julia Roberts, is locked in a potential fatal dance with her abusive husband, Patrick Bergen.
This is yours, Laura. We are one. We will always be one. Nothing can keep us apart.
Another bad marriage and another bad film is contained in Consenting Adults, where Kevin Kline is accused of murdering his neighbor's wife after he yields to the guy's sleazy arguments in favor of wife swapping. Nice neighborhood, huh?
You want to make love to my wife, but you're afraid you'll get caught.
Not every divorce-inspired film is lousy. A major exception is Danny DeVito's The War of the Roses, a great movie which took a deadly serious comic look at divorce.
I am the one who found this house. I bought everything in it.
With my money. It's a lot easier to spend it than it is to make it, honey bun.
You might not have made it if not for me, sweet cakes.
Another good film on the divorce subject, Woody Allen's recent Husbands and Wives, with its fresh out of the headlines combatants.
Total insanity. You'll be back together in 1 week.
She's going to keep the place in Riverdale, and I'm looking for a place in town.
Oh, I just feel shattered.
I don't think we can underestimate the effects on the national psyche of a 40+% divorce rate. Marriage was once thought to be permanent and good. At the very least today, it's considered problematic. This is a major shift in a matter of deepest personal significance, a change that has occurred mostly within the last generation. It's a national nightmare that's not going away from our movie screens.
No, it isn't. And so, as opposed to the old movies where marriage was the end of the story, they get married
at the start
and they live happily ever after. Now they start out married and it gets worse, and then they start to fight, and then people come in from the outside and it's even worse. And so I guess the message is, A, don't get married. B, if you do get married, don't get divorced, and certainly never have an affair. Now that might seem like a positive message, except the fact is that the whole thing is surrounded around by this notion of extreme danger, that anything involving a commitment is likely to backfire.
What would be very interesting, and we're going to get to this a little later, would be to look at the people who are making the films and wonder what their divorce rate and marriage rate is, because I think that, again, as we're talking about, they're writing out of and creating out of personal experience.
Well, you know, what often happens in Hollywood is that people take things that happen to themselves and fictionalize them. Now, I think that what happens there is that their wives or husbands don't kill them, but they take them to the cleaners in divorce court, and they get all their money, and they get their Mercedes-Benz, and this is so terrible that they sit down and write screenplays in which their spouse turns out to be a homicidal maniac.
When we come back, a look at how the movies borrow from the real-life dramas that play every night in the sensational tabloid TV shows.
I've been noticing some behavior that I feel might be inappropriate.
My assistant.
Maybe someday I won't be your assistant.
That's a scene from the coming attractions trailer for the new thriller The Temp, where Timothy Hutton begins to wonder if he was right to trust Super Secretary Lara Flynn Boyle. Sometimes the plots for new movies resemble the setups for the sensational TV talk shows and the tabloid news magazines like Hard Copy and A Current Affair. If I use phrases like babysitters who kill and the roommate from hell, you might wonder if I was describing a movie or the panelists on Oprah or Sally or Phil. But those are the concepts of recent thrillers warning that you can't trust anybody, especially the people who seem most trustworthy. One of the big surprise hits of recent years was The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, starring Rebecca De Mornay as a seemingly perfect find, a trustworthy nanny, an American citizen. She loves children and she fits right into a happy family. Unluckily, she also has a dark and dangerous hidden side. Then there was Jennifer Jason Leigh as the perfect roommate for Bridget Fonda in Single White Female. She was neat, she was clean, she paid her rent on time, and she was a homicidal maniac. With someone like that, you want to call the cops, but in the 1992 film Unlawful Entry, Ray Liotta played a cop who moved in and started terrorizing the family that needed his protection.
I could kill you.
The 1992 Academy Award winner, The Silence of the Lambs, gave an ironic twist to this trend. Although Anthony Hopkins played a savage cannibal, Jodie Foster winds up confiding to her roommate that Hopkins is the only person she can really trust, even when he's on the loose.
He won't come after me.
Oh, really?
He won't. I can't explain it. He would consider that rude.
And you know, the strange thing is, from all these thrillers in recent years, it was the Anthony Hopkins character that audiences, for some strange reason, had a real affection for.
Well, because he's up front. He is I am a killer, and you know, there I am. At least
we know where you stand.
Right.
The traditional thriller formula in the old days showed the danger always coming from outside, from criminals or psychopaths or escaped convicts or aliens from outer space. The home and the family were seen as safe zones to be protected against those outside threats. Now the fear has been internalized in these new Hollywood thrillers. The movies used to warn audiences never to talk to strangers. Now thriller heroes are discovering that the real stranger may be the person that they think they can love and trust.
Well, actually, I think what is happening is a number of forces. One, Marshall McLuhan said a long time ago that we were living in speed up.
Yeah.
And I think it's a fabulous phrase to account the fact that, all right, we've exhausted all the traditional enemies, now we're going to invent some new ones. Plus, the computer. I believe that there are screenwriters who, once The Hand That Rocks the Cradle hit, big, again, a surprise big hit, they said, all right, what are other domestic type help situations, and now we get The Temp. I mean, literally, that has to come out of just brainstorming sessions. So now it's a feeding frenzy out there for these ideas.
Pretty soon it's going to be The Gardener.
But you know,
The Plumber.
But then real life intrudes.
Sure.
And accelerates the trend. You have Jack in the Box. You have a fried chicken restaurant recently that have been the subject of national tragedies. And this is the sort of thing that fuels it and keeps it going.
There's almost nowhere you can go and almost nothing you can do that is safe. You can always just sit at home and drink a glass of water, but then again, it probably has lead in it.
Hey, how about our show? We haven't killed anybody yet.
Coming up next, Hollywood criticizes itself and many of the movies it makes.
I knew I can't make those movies anymore. I can't make another piece of art that glorifies violence and bloodshed and brutality.
Lover.
Are you the woman in the dream? Or is it this patient of yours, Eve?
A scene from a terrible film last year, a depressing film, Whispers in the Dark, about a psychiatrist under threat from another psychiatrist who was played by, of all people, Alan Alda, who used to be the nicest guy in the movies and on TV. And when I saw that movie, I thought, what kind of sickos wanted to make this story? And then I began to realize they're not pathologically sick. They're just movie people who are more in love with money and with a story gimmick than with life. And for them, the art of the deal has replaced art and humanity in their filmmaking. But what's reassuring, because this is not just going to be a show of despair, is that some of our best filmmakers are also critical of their brethren in the film business. For example, in Lawrence Kasdan's excellent Grand Canyon, Steve Martin played the kind of money-hungry film producer who might have actually made Whispers in the Dark.
Where's the shot?
What shot?
You took out the shot.
Which shot is that?
The money shot. Bus driver's head. The brains on the window shot. The viscer on the visor shot.
Another example, in Joel and Ethan Coen's darkly comic Barton Fink, we meet an old-time Hollywood executive who seems like any producer on the make today.
I'm a writer, Mr. Geisler. Ted Oldham said I should drop by this morning to see you about...
Head or act?
Huh?
No,
We need Indians for a Norman Steele Western.
I'm a writer. Ted Oakham.
Think about that thing. Writers come and go. We always need Indians.
I'm a writer.
And in one of the very best films of last year, Robert Altman's The Player, we meet a high-ranking studio executive played by Tim Robbins, who actually murders a screenwriter. Cause of death? The studio executive's self-hate because he knows, the writer knows, that Robbins has lost his soul.
Great movie, huh? So refreshing to see something like this after all these cop movies and, you know, things we do. Maybe we'll do a remake of this.
You'd probably give it a happy ending.
No, we keep it pure.
I'm sure the people in Hollywood watching this segment of the show are going to be crying unfair. It's just more Hollywood bashing. Well, to that I'd say, hey, we're not the ones making the charges against you. Your own colleagues are. Your best colleagues with some very, very good recent films.
Well, I think what they're saying, Altman and the Coen brothers and so forth, is that a lot of people out there are on automatic pilot just throwing a lot of garbage and a lot of violence at people without any thought about it at all. Because, of course, the Coen brothers themselves made one of the most violent films of all time in Blood Simple, but it was a very good film.
Yes.
And so that I think essentially the issue that we have to get back to here is the fact that Hollywood and the people who go to Hollywood films all seem to be afraid of love right now, and they seem to have this hunger for movies that feed them this kind of negative thinking. I think that the directors that you cited are wishing that it wasn't so, wishing that more films were upbeat and were more successful. But of course, for example, Grand Canyon, ironically, was a box office flop.
But it was a very good film.
Yes, it was.
And I think that what they're saying is that it seems to be a little bit institutionalized. I think the fear that you're talking about, what I hear out in Hollywood is that the fear level in the business has risen to an all-time high, triggered a lot by the amount of money that's going on. And so maybe that fear that things are lousy out there and all the work environment that they're in, that people are getting beat up and sharpshooting them, all that is being written large on the screen. Sometimes well, quite often badly. When we come back, fear of the future as Hollywood uneasily eyes the approaching millennium.
Minds about the future. On the one hand, it held out the promise of utopia, but on the other hand, it was a dreary police state or a nuclear wasteland, or aliens wanted to turn us into slaves or food. Recent movies have lost almost all signs of hope and see the future as a prospect of doom and a source of threat. The basic thrust of the Terminator movies, for example, is an attack on the present by the future.
Go.
Look at these other movie visions of the brave new world that we cannot look forward to. There's a cult following for Akira and other examples of Japanimation, animated movies from Japan about a dismal post-apocalyptic world.
Beware of those who distort providence under the guise of science. Under the guise of development, we find waste after waste. Under the guise of culture, we find desolation of the human heart.
Blade Runner, with its view of Los Angeles at war with itself, was not as popular when it came out as it is now, where it's a big seller and renter on home video.
A new life awaits you in the off-world colony.
And in thrillers like Freejack.
You want some of this?
What is it?
River rat.
And the Mad Max movies, ecological disaster has reduced the world to a war of survival of the fittest.
In the tanker. That's where they keep it. Thousands of gallons, much as you want. If anyone's gonna get in there, it's gonna be you.
Now, if you can believe the bleak vision in all of these movies, there is absolutely nothing to look forward to in the 21st century. I know audiences are not exactly clamoring for optimistic predictions about the future. I haven't seen any movies recently. Remember those popular mechanics covers where guys fly around in their private airplanes? But has any writer or any director speculated about the good things that might be in store for us? Wouldn't it be fun to see a movie in which the future is better than the present, happier, safer, and healthier? I guess not.
Well, Roger, actually, if you think about it, 2001, made in 1968, was a much more optimistic. It ended with the Star Baby, with a rebirth of the planet.
Yes.
I mean, that was, and that shows you how far we've come. Why? And
if that movie were remade today, you'd see the Star Baby, and then it would be hit with an automatic machine gun.
You got it right. Or the Star Baby would have a glistening and pull a knife out of its diaper.
That's right.
Okay.
Yes.
I like that one. Okay, that's going to be made today. I know that. I think I know why. Fear of the millennium. know you've heard the story before, but it's true. Francis Truffaut once said to me that he thought that the reason why the world was going nuts, and this was he was talking about the late 70s, going nuts is because people were afraid we would not make it as a civilization to the millennium. He said that once we pass the millennium, people will breathe a collective sigh of relief and be more optimistic. And I think that's a very deep-seated fear.
There might be something else, too. For a long time in America, we have had an external threat. Communism.
Yes.
Russia, the Soviet Union, intercontinental ballistics missiles. They're all going to kill us. We're going to die in a nuclear holocaust. Now, it looks as if maybe somehow we're going to escape that fate, and so
it's on us.
Then it's internalized.
Yes. In other words, if we screw it up, it's our fault.
And we already feel guilty because we're afraid we might.
Exactly right. A lot of these films that we've been talking about are available on home video.
Yes,
there are some very good films, particularly that section about those filmmakers, the Coen brothers and The Player, Barton Fink. Those are all available on home video and are definitely worth screening. Okay, that's it for this special show. Next week we'll be back with reviews of some new movies. Maybe there'll be an optimistic one in the bunch. Until then, the balcony is closed.
Kraft-free peppercorn ranch non-fat dressing. So good it's anything but the same old grind. If it tastes too good to be fat-free, it's Kraft-free. Coracidin for use at the first sign of a cold or flu. It'll relieve all your major symptoms fast and help keep them from getting worse. Coracidin D, the sooner the better. It's America's favorite jelly bean. Jelly Belly, now appearing at theaters and video stores with good taste. Jelly Belly beans, try them, you'll love them. Easy Spirit walking shoes. Walking shoes for those who want to get even further away from it all. Easy Spirit, our difference is our cushioning.